What's up, Professor Wergeles here. We just created our Amazon Ubuntu instance. We've now SSH to it, and now we're ready to install a LAMP stack. Now, you're going to want to know some things before you start installing a LAMP stack. First is, what is a LAMP stack? DigitalOcean actually has good documentation. I recommend you go through this tutorial and actually read it so you can do well on the quiz and on the exams. Now, this document actually goes quite in depth. It talks about a firewall and also sets up a secure MySQL connection, which is good, but this is more for production. For this class, we simply need to install a LAMP stack. So you basically just need to do about half of this tutorial. Although if you go through the whole tutorial, it's not going to hurt you by any means. In fact, it'll probably help allow you to understand what's actually happening. So I recommend to at least go through the content that we're going to go through in this video. But if you want to learn more and go above and beyond the class, then go over this whole tutorial and try to understand deeply what's happening. Now, first things first, what is a LAMP stack? A LAMP stack is installing Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. This is the default LAMP stack. It can be modified. Maybe instead of MySQL, use Mongo. Maybe instead of MySQL, use MariaDB. Maybe instead of PHP, use Python. There could be a lot of different variations here, but this is the default LAMP stack, and this is the LAMP stack that we'll be using for this course. It's going to be Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. Now, Linux is going to be our Ubuntu. So Linux is our Ubuntu system. So we already have a Ubuntu server set up and ready to go. What we need to do is install Apache, MySQL, and PHP. Now, Apache is a web server. Okay, there's a big difference between a server, a physical server, and a web server. Our physical server is this virtual machine here on Amazon. So if I go back to the AWS console and I look at my instances, this is my server. If I try to go to the IP address right now, so I have a public DNS. So if I go to networking, okay, you'll see I have a public DNS. So if I try to open this address, nothing's here. So I have a physical server, a machine that's running Ubuntu. You can think of it like your computer. Think if your laptop was connected to the internet and you're running Ubuntu on your laptop and I'm remote desktoping to it, or I'm SSHing to it. That's going to be the same thing. So on Amazon, you can imagine on Amazon, they have a machine that's running for me. So let me just draw a little bit of picture here. Okay, so here's us on our local machine. We have a computer, and basically we're going to the web. We're basically connecting through the network, and Amazon has this big cloud. So you can imagine this cloud, and in this cloud, they got millions of servers or hundreds of thousands of servers. And here's a server that I'm connecting to in their cloud. So I need to go through Amazon AWS's firewall, and I need to connect to this server, go through its firewall. And then on this server, I'm going to have a software that's a web server that's going to host my websites. Okay, so there's two different things here. Here's my local machine. This is my laptop. We call the local machine your laptop or your desktop, whatever you're using. This is going to be my internet connection. So this is going to be our internet connection. Okay, this is Amazon AWS's cloud. This is all their resources. This is going to be an EC2 server. This is going to be our Ubuntu. This is our Ubuntu 18.04 server. And on this physical server, we're going to have a web server, which is going to be Apache. Apache is going to be our web server. And this web server is going to actually host the websites, run the websites, allow a machine to grab the websites and load them onto the browser. Okay, so this is a double connection. Right now, our internet connection's over SSH. So we're doing an SSH connection. Later, when we're on the browser, we're going to be using HTTP and HTTPS. Okay, so we'll use different connections. Right now, we're connecting over the web via SSH, which is going to be port 22. Okay, and now we're going to install a LAMP stack. So on this server, we're not only going to have a web server, which is Apache, we're also going to have a database. And they usually draw a database symbol, kind of 3 circles like this. And it looks horrible because I'm drawing with my finger, but we're going to have a database. It's going to be MySQL. Okay, and we're going to have some backend code to connect these two. We're going to be using PHP. So on this server will also be a database. We could use the cloud, and they could have another AWS cloud service. Maybe they have a MySQL server over here. We have 2 instances where they connect to each other. So I have a web server on one and a database in the other. And that's a good structure. So if you take cloud computing, you'll go more into depth about all the services that Amazon has to offer. But for this class, we're going to have 1 server, and everything's going to be on this server. We're going to install a LAMP stack on a single virtual machine, although it could be distributed. If you go to big companies like Google or Amazon or Facebook, all of their systems are distributed. But that is content for another course. This is kind of what it looks like. Not the best drawing, but hopefully you get a basic visual representation of what's going on. Now, I can't reach a website yet because I don't have a web server. So if I go back, I need to install Apache. MySQL is going to be the database, and PHP is going to be the server-side code. So in this class, we actually learn a lot. We learn HTML, CSS, JavaScript, jQuery. That's all front-end development. Now we're getting to the servers. We have a Ubuntu server, which is running Apache, that has a MySQL database, and the backend code that we're going to be using is PHP. Now, a lot of students say, well, why are we still learning MySQL and PHP? That's so old. We should learn Mongo. We should learn Node. If you want to learn Mongo and Node, you need to take 4830. But MySQL and PHP are not old. In fact, if you go to Facebook, they're still using PHP. So if I go to facebook.com, you'll be surprised that if I do /login.php, the page actually loads. Facebook still uses MySQL and PHP. In fact, even if you go to their homepage, so I'm not going to log in here, but let's say you log in and you're on the homepage, do home-/.php, and you'll see it actually loads. You'll see it's loading here. This is a live version. You must log in to continue. It sees that I want to go to home.php, but first it's making me log in. So MySQL PHP is actually used by Facebook. It's also used by Pinterest. And I love to hear the Pinterest creators, the founders' story. And I don't want to go too in depth because this should be a short video, but essentially he wanted to use new technologies when building Pinterest. So he used Node and MongoDB. This was a long time ago when it first was developed and first out. Now MongoDB is actually very stable. But a few months later, after he had a lot of users, 2 in the morning, the site crashed. Okay, so he goes and he searches how to fix this error with MongoDB. And he searches, he can't find anything. I'm sure if he searched that same thing today, he'd find hundreds of articles, but he couldn't find anything back then. So he searched, he couldn't fix the bug, and he needed to get the site back up because every time your site's down, you're losing users. You can't have your site down for a few hours. That's insane. You got to have your site running constantly. So he didn't know what to do. He rebuilt the entire Pinterest using MySQL and PHP. He looked it up. He said, MySQL, that's the tried and true database. I'm going to go with it. Same thing happened. A few months later, site crashed, 2 in the morning, too many users. He searched the MySQL database error. Thousands of articles came up. And he said, even though MySQL and PHP is one of the founding technologies for web development, he said it's tried and true. And he said he's going to continue to use it because every time it breaks down, there's articles to fix it. In fact, Facebook still pushes updates to MySQL. That way, the general public can use it. So PHP and MySQL are not old. They're still common use technologies in some of the biggest companies today, like Facebook and Pinterest and a lot of others. And that's your LAMP stack. You have Linux, which is Ubuntu, Apache, MySQL, PHP. Now we need to install Apache before we can do anything. And before you install anything, it's a good idea to do an update. Once I install Apache and MySQL and PHP, if I go back to do an update, a lot of times the packages will crash because they're not going to be synced. So it's good to update the server as soon as you get it installed. As soon as you basically create the server, go ahead and do an update. That's the perfect time to do an update. That way, none of the other apps crash. Now you'll see I'm doing sudo apt update. So I'm doing sudo apt update. I always update the server when I first install it. That's the perfect time to do an update. After I install packages, a lot of times things will break. So once you first start your server, do an update. And now I'm going to install Apache. Now you'll see Apache 2 here is actually the keyword for Apache. That's the package name. So I'll do a sudo apt get or sudo apt install Apache 2. You'll see it takes some space. 6,000 kilobytes. So it's about 7 megabytes file. I'm going to click on yes. Go ahead and let it install. And now I'm installing my web server. So I have a physical server, which is a physical machine. And I have a web server, which is software that actually hosts the website. And this software is what we just installed. So now Apache is there. If I go back to this article, it talks about the firewall. Right now, our firewall is down. This is a development server. If you want to get into the firewall and make your server a production server, you need to take 4830. For this class, we basically just get a server up, a development server, and I show you how to do a web page on the server and show you how to make a development server. In 4830, we make a full production server, fully secure, user accounts, passwords, firewalls, everything. So that's more for 4830. Now I've installed this Apache server. So here's my public DNS. If I do a refresh, okay, do a Command Shift R if you're on Mac, or a Control Shift R. Let me see. Let me go ahead and open up a new page here. Let's see, site can't be reached. I may need to restart the server. Sometimes the browser will cache the page. Sometimes you have to load it on an incognito window. Let's see, it's using HTTPS. That may be a problem. It may need to be just HTTP. Okay, so I got rid of the S. You'll see I have HTTP. Now, let's say that HTTPS was there before and the page didn't load. You can test it. If you take the S off and you do not have a web server, then the content will not load. You need a physical server and you also need a web server. In 4830, we'll go over Node and other types of web servers. So we'll actually go over a mean stack. In 2830, we'll focus on a lamp stack. I recommend that you look at both for this class and just get a basic understanding of what each are. Now, this page is very important. Although a lot of people ignore it, I recommend you read it. It has a lot of details here. It tells you, one, where the public HTML directory is. It tells you, number two, what the file name should be named, which is a requirement on the challenge. And it also talks about where important files are. Okay, it talks about the configuration files and exactly where everything's located. So you need to read this. Take your time, read it. If you don't know what things mean, search them. Okay, so Apache 2 is our Apache server, and here is most of the details for it. It talks about the configuration file, the ports, the public HTML directory. These are all important information. In fact, this is an exam question. Where's the public HTML directory? It's in /. This / is very important. That means it starts from the root. It's in / var www html. This needs to be memorized. What should the file names be? The file name should be this, index.html. This is very important. It can also be index.php. These are all the default configurations for Apache. These can be changed. If I don't want the public HTML directory here, I can put it somewhere else, but I need to start changing the configuration files. And for 2830, we don't go into that. We're just going to set up a development server and leave it as a default LAMP stack. If you want to learn how to change configuration files, set up name-based virtual hosts, which it talks about here, then you need to take 4830. We go into all of that. Now that the web server is created, I need to install some of the others. Okay, so I'm not going to do a firewall in this class, although we will do it for 4830. You'll see here, I need to install MySQL. So it's simple. You'll do a sudo apt get, or you can do a sudo apt install MySQL server. I'm going to follow the tutorial. So I'm going to do an app install. You'll see it's really small, 200 megabytes. Click yes, go ahead, let it install. So now I'm installing the M for the LAMP stack. I already have L for Linux, which is Ubuntu, A for Apache, which is my web server. Now I'm installing the M, which is MySQL. That's going to be my database. And you'll notice this tutorial does a MySQL secure installation. For production servers, I recommend you do this. For a development server, it may cause problems because if you forget this password, you're not going to be able to get into the server. So I actually recommend that you don't do a MySQL secure installation unless you know what you're doing. That way you don't have to remember any passwords. This is going to be a development server, so it's not going to be secure, but we're going to get a website up and going with the database. And then in 4830, we're going to lock it down and make it secure. So now the M is installed. Now you should be able to type in MySQL. You'll see it's access denied. So if I do a sudo MySQL, I'm logging in as the administrator. So now I'm in the MySQL command prompt or the terminal. Okay, when I do sudo MySQL, I'm logging in as an admin. If I want to get out, I can do a quit. Okay, now I'm exiting the MySQL terminal, the command prompt, and now I'm back to Ubuntu. So MySQL is installed. You'll see how easy this is. So I'm done with the M. If I continue, okay, you see it does a sudo MySQL. You'll see there's no password for the root. It recommends that you set a password for the root. I would as well if you were on a production server. For development, I do not recommend this because if you forget this password, you will not be able to log in and you're going to have to create a new server. So don't set the password unless you remember it or write it down. The last thing is PHP. But I don't just need PHP. I need to connect PHP and MySQL. PHP and MySQL go perfect together. They're like go hand in hand. Node and Mongo go well together. Yes, PHP can connect to Mongo, but it's not as common. Okay, it's not as easy to do, I would say. Like PHP and MySQL, they work seamlessly together. Node and Mongo, it just works perfectly together. You can mix and match, but definitely MySQL and PHP go hand in hand. So I'm going to copy this command here. So I'm installing PHP, but I'm also installing different packages to connect PHP and MySQL. Okay, so I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste it as well. Sudo apt install PHP, different libraries for Apache 2, and also PHP and MySQL. Okay, I'm going to click on yes. It should go through correctly, especially if you're on the right version of the server. If you're on a different version like Ubuntu 16 or Ubuntu 20, some of these commands may fail. So make sure you're on a Ubuntu 18 server. And that's it. I've installed everything. I've installed my LAMP stack. I have Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. Now it talks about looking at the directory. It actually tells you what the file name should be. This is an exam question. This is a quiz question. And it's also going to be on your challenge. It tells you to name the file so you don't have to type in the path. It talks about all this here. So make sure you come back and read this. You don't need to change the configuration files. Use the default configuration files, but you should know what the default configuration is. That's a common thing. So you notice this, in order for all your changes to be recognized, you need to restart Apache. So I'll do a sudo system control restart Apache 2. Everywhere you see Apache 2 is going to be Apache. On Red Hat or other Linux distributions, you'll see it's called HTTPD. HTTPD is also Apache. So I'm going to go ahead and restart it. Okay, you'll want to know the Apache name for common distributions for Linux. And I'm going to do the status. Make sure everything looks good. So you should get active and running. If you get any other message, there's a problem and you need to find out what's happening. So you'll see they do a lot of other things, PHP CLI, some others. You can set up a virtual host, but you don't need to. We go over this in 4830. I actually recommend, we can focus on this later, but if you want to go above and beyond the course, feel free. You'll see how it enables different configuration files. This is a really good article. In fact, it actually goes over a lot of content we go over in 4830. You'll see it if you want to test your PHP, it's really easy. Basically, go into your public HTML directory. We're going to be using the default for this class. So it's var www html. Make a file called info.php and put info, call the PHP info function. Okay. And then you can see if you have PHP installed correctly. So if I do an ls, you won't see anything. That's the list of current directory. If I do a pwd, that's the path to the current working directory. So I'm in home Ubuntu. This is my user account. I'm going to cd back. So that's going back a directory, do a pwd. Now you'll see I'm in home. If I do a cd ... I'm going back another directory. If I do a pwd, you'll see I'm starting from the root directory. So this is an absolute file path. I'm starting from the root directory. If I do an ls from here, I have a lot of files. So I'm going to cd into var. Okay, I'm going to cd, and if I do an ls, you'll see the www. So I'm going to cd into www, do an ls. You can also do ll for list long. That's a shorthand. And I'm going to cd into HTML. Now, I'm not typing these file names. I'm typing H and hitting tab. It's an autofill. I don't type the file names. I let the terminal do it for me. So hitting the tab key. If I do an ls, you'll see the default HTML file is right there. So if I do a new one, let's say I do vi index.php, hit enter. So vi is like Vim. It's the same as Vim. I'm going to click I for insert. I'm going to start a PHP script. So that's the start tag. Here's the close tag. And I'm going to do what they told me to do, PHP info, and call the function. Make sure the semicolon's there. PHP is really strict. If you miss a semicolon, the code won't compile. I'm going to do an escape. And I'm going to do a shift colon. And I'm going to do a WQ for write and quit. Or I like to do X, which is a shorthand for write and quit. And you'll see it can be open for writing. So here's a problem. Okay, this is a read-only file. So to exit this, I need to do a shift colon, Q for quit, exclamation for a force quit. So I'm going to force quit. If I do an LL for list long or an ls-l, you'll see it's only read write for the owner, read for the group, read for the world. So it's only a readable file for the world because root is the owner. Now, if you go through the proper contents, it'll probably tell you to change the permissions for the directory and add yourself to the user group. You'll see here it tells you to do this and add your user to the group, which is a great thing to do, but it's a little bit above this course. I'm just going to open everything wide up. So I'm going to go back a directory. And I'm going to do ls-l so you can see the contents. So this is read, write, execute for the owner, which is root, read and execute for the group, which is also root, and read and execute for the world, which is everybody else. This is the development server, so I don't recommend doing this for a production server, but I'm going to open this wide up. So I'm going to do a sudo change mod 777 on the HTML directory. Now, if I do an ls-l or an ll for short, you'll see it turned green, which means it's wide open. It's warning you, hey, this is wide open. It's not a good idea to do. So it's trying to give you a flag. They should have made it red. If I cd back into it, now it's read, write, executable for the world. So that means everybody can write in this directory. So it's not secure. We will focus on security in 4830. Now I can do a vi index.php. Now if I click on I'm going to do an open tag and a close tag. And in between, I'm going to call PHP info function. Now I'm going to click on escape, shift colon WQ for write and quit, or I like to do X because I'm lazy. And you'll see it wrote successfully this time. So now if I come back to the browser, if I do a refresh, it actually opens up index.html. And if you read this file or if you read this document, it explains why. Why does it open up index.html first? Why does this happen? It tells you right here, this is a priority list. So it's going to try to look for index.html, then CGI, then PL, then PHP, then XHTML, then .htm in this order. So whenever it finds one, it opens that file first. So if I come back over here, I could either get rid of the index.html, then it would open, or I can type in index.php and you'll see the PHP info page. If this works, you know you've installed PHP successfully. And now we can continue to making a hello world page. So now we have a server running on Amazon AWS. It's Ubuntu server. We've successfully installed a LAMP stack, which is Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. And now we're ready to create our first hello world page. We verified PHP works, which is a good thing because a lot of students will get halfway through the next challenge and they'll notice PHP wasn't installed correctly. And they've already installed all these other softwares and packages, and then it's really difficult to install. So make sure you install it correctly here at the beginning. That way, when we get to the PHP challenge, you have no issues. We're about to create the Hello World page, which is basically going over the challenge. It's exactly what you need to do for the challenge. We're going to create a Hello World page. We're also going to connect FileZilla to our servers. That way you can upload your portfolio site to this server. Stick with Professor Wergeles, and we'll see you in the next video.